The dim lights of O'Malley's bar flickered like dying stars as the entire room fell into a stunned silence. Glasses paused mid-sip, conversations halted mid-sentence, and even the jukebox seemed to hold its breath. There, in the center of it all, stood Sarah, the waitress everyone knew and loved, her uniform stained with spilled beer and her face a mask of quiet defiance. But it wasn't her that made the bar freeze. It was the man who had just shoved her, now crumbling to his knees, his tough guy facade shattering like glass. What happened next would change everything, but to understand why the whole place stopped, we have to go back to how it all began. Hold on tight, because this story is about to pull you in deep, and just when you think you know what's coming, everything flips. It was a rainy Tuesday night in the small town of Riverton, where O'Malley's had been the heartbeat of the community for decades. Sarah Thompson had worked there for 5 years, ever since her husband, Mark, passed away in a car accident that left her a widow at 28 with a 3-year-old daughter, Lily, to raise alone. Sarah was the kind of woman who remembered everyone's order, who laughed at bad jokes to make patrons feel welcome, and who slipped extra fries to the kids when their parents weren't looking. She wasn't just a waitress, she was the glue that held the place together. But that night, as the storm raged outside, Trouble walked in wearing a leather jacket and a scowl. His name was Jax Harlan, a burly trucker with a reputation for starting fights in bars across the state. Jax had rolled into town after a long haul, his temper frayed from hours on the road and a recent divorce that had left him bitter and broke. He slammed into a stool at the bar, barking for a whiskey neat, and Sarah served him with her usual smile, even though she could sense the storm brewing in his eyes. "Rough night?" she asked gently, sliding the glass his way. Jax grunted, downing it in one gulp, and demanded another. The bar was packed with regulars, old Mr. Wilkins nursing his pint in the corner, the young couple on their first date giggling by the window, and a group of factory workers unwinding after shift. No one paid Jax much mind at first, until he started complaining loudly about the lousy service, and how women like her were the reason his life was a mess. Sarah ignored the jabs, focusing on her other tables, but Jax's voice grew louder, drawing stares. He accused her of shorting his drink, then of flirting with another customer. Anything to pick a fight. The tension built like the thunder outside, and when Sarah finally turned to him, calmly asking if he'd like to settle his tab and leave, Jax exploded. He shot up from his stool, his face red with rage, and shoved her hard against the counter. The bar gasped as Sarah stumbled, trays clattering to the floor. "Who do you think you are?" Jax bellowed, towering over her. Time seemed to slow. Would anyone step in? Would Sarah fight back? Or was this the moment everything spiraled out of control? But wait, before we see what happens next, let's peel back the layers on Sarah's life, because this wasn't just about a rude customer. Sarah had grown up in Riverton, the daughter of a single mom who worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. She knew hardship like an old friend. After high school, she married Mark, her childhood sweetheart, and they dreamed of a simple life, a house with a yard, more kids, maybe a dog. Lily came along, bright-eyed and full of giggles, and for a while, it was perfect. Then came the accident, a drunk driver on a slick road, and suddenly Sarah was alone, drowning in grief and bills. O'Malley's became her lifeline. The owner, grumpy old Pat, gave her flexible hours so she could be there for Lily's bedtime stories. Sarah poured her heart into the job, turning strangers into friends, but deep down, she carried a weight that no tip jar could lighten. She volunteered at the local shelter on her days off, helping women escape abusive situations, drawing from her own quiet strength. "You've got to stand tall, even when the world pushes you down," she'd tell them, echoing her mother's words. Jax, on the other hand, was a man haunted by his own demons. Raised in a broken home where his father ruled with fists and his mother cowered in silence, Jax learned early that anger was the only way to feel powerful. He hit the road as a trucker to escape, but the miles only amplified his loneliness. His ex-wife, Carla, had left him after years of his outbursts, taking their son with her. "You're just like your old man," she'd said in their final fight, words that cut deeper than any knife. Jax drank to forget, fought to feel alive, but each bar brawl left him emptier. That night in O'Malley's, he wasn't just shoving a waitress, he was shoving away the pain that threatened to consume him. Back in the bar, as Sarah steadied herself against the counter, the room held its collective breath. Mr. Wilkins started to rise from his seat, his arthritic hands trembling, but before he could intervene, Sarah looked Jack straight in the eyes. "I get it," she said softly, her voice steady despite the shove. "You're hurting. But hurting me won't fix it." Jax laughed bitterly, raising his hand as if to strike, but then he froze. Something in her words pierced through his rage, a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. The bar watched, hearts pounding. Would he back down? Or would this escalate into something irreversible? As the standoff lingered, let's dive deeper into the lives intertwined that night. Take the young couple by the window, Emily and Tom, both in their early 20s, on what was supposed to be a magical first date. Emily worked at the local library, recommending books that transported people to better worlds, while Tom was a mechanic with grease-stained hands and a heart full of dreams. They'd met online, bonding over shared love of old movies, and this date was their chance to see if sparks flew in real life. But as Jax's chaos unfolded, Emily clutched Tom's arm, whispering, "Should we do something?" Tom hesitated, his mind racing, hero or bystander? It was a test neither had signed up for. Then there were the factory workers, a tight-knit group led by Carlos, a father of 3 who emigrated from Mexico years ago, chasing the American dream. He'd faced discrimination, long hours, and the constant fear of layoffs, but he never lost his optimism. "We stick together," he'd say, buying rounds for his crew. That night, as Jax shoved Sarah, Carlos exchanged glances with his friends. They knew Sarah, she'd listened to their stories, celebrated their birthdays. But stepping in meant risking a fight, maybe even the police. The challenge loomed, loyalty versus safety. Sarah, rubbing her shoulder where Jax had pushed her, didn't back away. Instead, she reached under the counter and pulled out a small photo from her apron pocket, a faded picture of her, Mark, and baby Lily at the park. "This is my family," she said, holding it up for Jax to see. "I lost my husband because someone like you got behind the wheel angry and drunk. I won't let you take my peace too." Jax's face twisted, his raised hand dropping slowly. The bar murmured, sensing a shift. But just as he opened his mouth to respond, the door burst open with a gust of wind and rain. In walked a stranger, a tall woman with a badge glinting on her coat. Who was she? And why did Jax's eyes widen in recognition? The woman was Detective Elena Reyes, Carlos's sister, who had just finished her shift at the precinct. She'd stopped by O'Malley's for a quick bite, unaware of the drama unfolding. Elena had her own scars, a career fighting crime in a male-dominated field, where she'd seen too many domestic calls end in tragedy. Spotting the tension, she strode forward, her presence commanding. "Everything all right here?" she asked, her eyes locking on Jax. Sarah nodded, but Jax backed up a step, muttering curses. The bar tensed again. Would Elena arrest him? Or was there more to Jax's story that even he didn't want revealed? As Elena approached, flashbacks flooded Jax's mind. Months ago, he'd been at another bar, similar scene, but that time he'd gone too far, hospitalizing a bartender in a blind rage. Carla had bailed him out, but it was the final straw for their marriage. Now, facing Elena, he felt the walls closing in. "I didn't mean..." He stammered, but Sarah interrupted. "We all make mistakes," she said, her voice laced with empathy. "But you can choose different." The factory workers shifted, ready to back her up, while Emily and Tom watched in awe, their date forgotten in the real-life drama. Elena assessed the situation quickly. "Sir, I think it's time you left," she said firmly, but not harshly. Jax hesitated, his tough exterior cracking. In that moment, he saw Sarah not as a target, but as a mirror, someone who'd been shoved by life and stood back up. Tears welled in his eyes, unbidden. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words foreign on his tongue. But as he turned to go, he collapsed to his knees, clutching his chest. The bar froze. Was it a heart attack? Or something deeper breaking inside him? Panic rippled through the room. Sarah knelt beside him first, despite everything. "Call 911, she shouted, checking his pulse. Mr. Wilkins fumbled for his phone, the factory workers cleared space, and Elena took charge, starting CPR. Emily and Tom rushed to help, fetching water and blankets. In those frantic minutes, the bar transformed from a place of division to one of unity. Jax gasped, coming to as sirens wailed in the distance. Why are you helping me?" he croaked to Sarah. She smiled through tears. "Because everyone deserves a second chance. Even you." The ambulance arrived, paramedics stabilizing Jax. As they wheeled him out, he grabbed Sarah's hand. "Tell my son. I'm gonna change," he said weakly. Sarah nodded, promising to pass the message if she could. The bar erupted in relieved chatter, hugs exchanged, toasts raised. Pat, the owner, who had been in the back, emerged and declared drinks on the house. But the real resolution came later. Jax survived what turned out to be a panic attack triggered by years of suppressed emotion. From the hospital, he reached out to Sarah, apologizing profusely and entering rehab. Inspired, he started volunteering at the shelter where Sarah helped, turning his pain into purpose. Sarah's act of kindness rippled outward. Carlos and his crew organized a fundraiser for her, easing her financial burdens. Emily and Tom. Their date ended with a kiss in the rain, the night forging a bond stronger than any movie. Mr. Wilkins, moved by the events, shared his own story of loss, finding new friends in the process. Riverton buzzed with the tale, reminding everyone that compassion could thaw even the coldest hearts. In the end, what made the bar freeze wasn't violence, but vulnerability, the raw humanity exposed when walls came down. It's a reminder that we're all fighting battles, and a single act of grace can rewrite someone's story. Life shoves us all sometimes, but standing tall with empathy? That's what inspires change. If this story touched you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of real heart and redemption. Thanks for watching.